Good to go? Okay, so welcome. Hi, everybody. There we go. See, this is going to be interactive. You're not going to be able to sit. Like, you're going to actually have to work in this one. I'm sorry in advance, but that's the point. So, yeah, not too late. They lock the doors, change her up. I'm Jordan. I don't have a bio. If you want to know that, talk to me later. There's my email. I'm better known as ciphertext for CTF-related stuff. I've been talking about this stuff and playing it for years. By day, I work for the man. By night, I hack for the fun. So, here's our talk. We're talking about what is Capture the Flag. We're talking about why you would do it, like what are the motivations behind playing it or running it. Talk about some of the skills, the parts of playing it, the fun things about it. And then I'll have a little bit on running a CTF, which probably won't be relevant to most of you. So I've got it short, and I'll probably run out of time before I get to it anyways. But if you're interested in that, I've got some content here and some other stuff that I'm going to link to that will give you more information. So again, can you hear me in the back of the room? The ornery guys in the back, they didn't move? Awesome. Sweet. Okay, so what is CTF? Capture the flag. 1, 2, 3? Flag. All right, better. Yes, and I even broke it out. You have like 4 letters. It was super easy that time. So capture the flag is a generic term that gets used to all sorts of different things. You see it for running around in a field with a flag. I actually gave a presentation on capture the flag once. It turned out some general was in the room, I guess, whatever. And he came up to me after he was like, I like playing real capture the flag. Like, give me a field and a hill to capture and I'll take it. And I was like, well, then you would not like these games. But you are way too fit for this type of activity. But the idea here is that you're going to solve a bunch of challenges. They are wildly different in terms of the type of game and the style of game and the skills you use. The bottom line, the main feature is that these games are challenges, right? Like you're not sitting in a class and taking a test. Like you are solving problems, you're breaking into things, you're stopping people from breaking in. It is security related. Even that though gets twisted a little bit sometimes. It's just about the pure challenge, right? Like this is the point of it. So a couple of jargon entries for it. So I'm going to use flag and key interchangeably. I'll talk about the key sometimes. I'll talk about the flag sometimes. Same thing, right? It's the thing that gets you points. Sometimes it's literally just when you solve it, it auto scores it and you win. Sometimes you get a key or flag and you submit it to the score server and you get points. A lot of different ways that happens. SLA is a term that'll come up. Service level agreement, you'll hear like in like IT kind of worlds, like the SLAs, what your uptimes are, your number 9s. In CTF, it has a particular meaning. Many of the CTFs will score you because it turned out that when people started playing Capture the Flag games, they realized that when everyone can turn their services off, turn their computers off, they're really secure and it's a really boring game. So they started measuring what your uptime was, and they actually would make you keep your services up. So they use SLA to measure that. A service or binary tend to be interchangeable. For the types of games where you're actually running network services, binary could mean literally just zeros and ones. It's binary, but it's also sometimes used to mean a binary, like a file, a program, a service, the thing that's running that you're going to break into or defend, depending on the case. Quals and prequals is just a bunch of random terms. I'm so used to using some of these, so they may not be. Let me make sure I'm in frame with the webcam. Sorry. I'm so used to using some of these. If I say anything else that doesn't make sense, or it's like a sort of jargon term that I forgot to put up here, ask me. There we go. Nice. Now we're in hacker mode. Excellent. Love it. Especially it's cool with the glow of the badges. I like that. It's extra awesome. So quals and prequals. I'm going to ask questions of you guys too. So again, this is interactive, and if you have questions, stop and interrupt me. I am tremendously ADD, and so I like interruptions and don't mind switching back and forth. Quals and prequals. Anybody want to take a guess? These are not hard terms, right? Qualification and pre-qualification. So this one's entirely redundant, and it drives me nuts. This is sort of my pet peeve. People use the word pre-qual to talk about a qualifying round. So like DEF CON CTF, for example, has a qualifying round that you participate in, and if you qualify, then you play in the finals. And everyone calls it a pre-qualifying round. But what is this? The thing before the qualifying round? Anyways, that's just my little beef. Okay, but ultimately these are hacker games, right? That's the whole. I actually have that game too, although I stole the picture online. It's a hilarious little game. But these are essentially just hacker games. They're fun. They're games. That's what kind of makes them interesting. There's 3 basic models that I argue you can kind of look at all Capture the Flag games that fit in one of these 3 models. It's kind of a little military jargony, so you'll hear like blue team, red team exercises. Kind of comes from the military background. When they run their own testing games, they would have like a red team and a blue team. The blue team is the defending team, right? So if you're on the blue team, you're the good guys. Well, I like to be the offense, so I'd say the red team's the good guys, but that's another story. So in a blue team exercise, everybody is defending. The people playing the game are defenders, right? And so they just defend services, and then the organizers or some other third party is the attackers and are attacking everybody. In a red team exercise, obviously, it's the opposite. You playing the game are all attackers, you're all offensive, you're all problem solvers, and then you're all just attacking some kind of central thing. There's one central thing that's defending you. Everyone's trying to break in. I think that the CTF that's being played now is a little bit of a hybrid, but it's mostly a red team exercise. You're mostly breaking into other stuff. There's a little bit of a hacking other teams, but that would come in here. Like the real hack of the team kind of CTF, I call it full spectrum. There's people, the CTF Time website, which tracks a lot of CTFs, they use the phrase attack defense because you do both attack and defense at the same time. I think full spectrum sounds fancier, so that's why I use that term. But the idea here is, again, everybody who's playing is both offense and defense. And so you are defending your server, you're attacking everybody else, and they're crazy and ridiculous. And here's a quick overview. There are probably hundreds. I didn't actually count because I'm lazy. But there are just dozens and dozens of CTFs of all different sorts. These are just the sort of ones that I tend to play and the ones that I'm more familiar with. Again, there are lots and lots of them. So in terms of the blue team exercises, who's heard of the CCDC, the Collegiate Cyber Defense Competition? Who's played in CCDC? Sam, raise your hand. You have. There we go, a couple of you guys. And Hack UCF, by the way, just won the Southeast Regional, so round of applause for those guys. So this is a sort of nationwide competition. It's sponsored by DHS and SANS and a few other folks, and they have regional. All the colleges compete, and they're all defenders though. It really is a boring competition in my mind because you just sit there and like you change passwords and update your things, and just the offense gets to cheat, and the defenders can't do anything interesting. It's really boring. So not my favorite type of game. I'm a little biased though. And then of course on the offensive side, the pure red team games, you have things like the DEF CON qualifying round, Ghost in the Shell Code's the CTF I run. Plaid CTF. There's a bunch of other, the command and control tends to be more red team offensive based CTFs. These are nice because they're easy to set up, relatively easy to set up. There's still a lot of work, and all these are. Talk more about that later. But they have a lot of it's pure challenge. You just go, you solve a puzzle, you solve a challenge, and you kind of move on. So as a person playing it, it's less investment in a lot of ways. Then the full spectrum ones, there's relatively few of those. I actually managed to find a number of them, but they tend to be all in person because you've got to set up infrastructure. A few of them are VPN based. But that's where you're attacking. Those are kind of nuts, and a lot of things are different in that kind of CTF. Any questions? I'll stop randomly for questions if I'm not sure you guys are awake. So, questions. And I won't continue until I get one. I'm not bluffing. It could be an easy question.
Let's start. Which one of those previous lines?
Great question.
Just to get it going.
Probably none of these. That's the problem, and one of the points that I'm going to bring up is that the entry level into CTF is like by the time most people wouldn't go and join my CTF that I run because I build the CTF for the guys that win all these other CTFs, and so there's a group of relatively well in our little world we're well known, a dozen other people know us, so there's a couple dozen teams, maybe 20-30 teams that are playing a lot of these things, and it's kind of their own little world. So it is hard to get it. Seesaw, actually, Cybersecurity Awareness Week is a program at NYU Poly, and their qualification round is meant to be more entry level. I think it's only open to university students. No, I think for the qualification round, lets anybody play, but the finals, they sponsor university teams to go and play. But that actually is a relatively good introduction. They try to make them easier. The best thing you can do is play old ones online. You can kind of just generally look at the skills, the type of CTF you want to play, the skills that you're interested in, and then go play those type of CTFs and just put the time into it, kind of build up your skills there, and then you'll start getting to more and more and more, and then you won't have weekends anymore because there's that many CTFs. That's a good question. I need a better answer for that, actually. What's that? Plaid CTF is next week. Yeah, so there's literally one of the best CTFs next week. It's a little difficult though. That's the only problem in terms of I wouldn't. They try to make it range. So I made there's a timeline that I just put up online. This is some random website online. You can make timelines. For those that care about the history of DEF CON, I don't think anybody here really does. Do you? I mean, DEF CON's cool. It's neat. It's like the big daddy, granddaddy of all these things. I put way too much work. I didn't sleep, but I just was mapping. The hotel was in, who won the game, who organized the game. The only interesting thing to note is that this game, DEF CON in particular, has been going on since '96. So part of the people wanted me to mention this is the context of the game. Like this has been around for a while, DEF CON CTF in particular, and there's a lot of other CTFs that have been kind of ongoing for years, although it's really taken off in the last, I'd say, 5 years or so, where you have this explosion of just, again, a CTF every weekend just about on some of these things. So that's kind of interesting, but not really. Yeah, the only other interesting thing to note is there's a new organizer this year, so it'll be fun to see what DEF CON turns into or what changes happen from that. I'm optimistic. The guys that are running it have played before and know the game and should do a good job, although they didn't get a lot of time to organize for it, so they're not sleeping, speaking about having weekends getting ready. So here's the Jeopardy kind of board. This is what the DEF CON qualifying round looks like. It's got just a bunch of categories. All right, so why would you do it? Like I've talked about a little bit of like what these things are without going into details. We'll talk some more about some of the technical stuff. Why would you do it? You can get jobs. I actually got my current job mostly because I played CTFs. They took a look at my real resume. They're like, you play CTFs? Oh, that's interesting. Like, okay, maybe you can actually do some of this stuff. You get skills, like nunchuck skills and, sorry. Is it that early, really? That flat? No joke? Okay, sorry. But you really, so I hate running, right? I really just don't enjoy it. Like some people really enjoy that. That's awesome. I'm glad that you do, but I can't, I don't. But I love playing basketball. And so for me, basketball is a sneaky way to get exercise. Like I've tricked myself into bettering, my health by playing basketball because I think that's fun, even though I hate running. CTFs are the same way, right? Like, not a lot of people really enjoy just sitting in classrooms all day long learning. Like, people like learning, they just don't necessarily like classrooms and the tedium. But when you can play a game, where you can make it into this exercise and this challenge where you're beating other people and a score, like that's fun. So you're tricking yourself into enjoying it more. And so that I think is fun. Money? No, not really. You don't win a lot of money, actually. This is not like the World Series of Poker. I'm making your life difficult with the camera, aren't I? I'm like, it's good exercise. You can distract me. I'll move around. Okay. Cred, you get, not really. There's not a lot of people that actually even know what this world is. You'll get recognized by about a dozen people if you've won like a bunch of times in a row. So super cool. You can actually get a little bit of money. So here's a black badge that the DEF CON winners won. And somebody auctioned off one for a charity. And got $3,500 for their black badge. So you can only get this badge by winning different events at DEF CON. And the biggest event, you can win 8 of the badges, is the CTF. But again, that's not really it. The real reason you do it, the only really, really good reason, besides you learn and get the skills, is that it's fun. Again, this is a challenge. You're tricking yourself into learning, getting better skills, and that's going to benefit your job. It's going to benefit these other things. But really, they're a lot of fun. I mean, who doesn't want to hack something, right? Like, I've always wanted to hack stuff, but I don't want to go to jail. And that's increasingly common if you do that. I met Stephen Watt actually yesterday, and jail sucks, it turns out. So don't do that, right? Like don't do things that are illegal. I know that it's tempting sometimes, but because you can, it's easy. But don't do that. That's a bad idea. Instead, go play a CTF, right? It's a legal framework. It's much like the lockpicking village, right? Like don't become a burglar. But lockpicking is awesome and fun, and getting those skills and learning it and learning how they work and understanding how things operate more is a great thing to do. All right, so speaking of fun, let's talk about some challenges. I've chosen some challenges that are not the easiest of challenges, but also that have kind of some fun tricks or fun quirks to them. The easiest of challenges will literally be like word puzzles, things you can quickly Google, trivia on all sorts of things that are kind of fun to learn, and they get the whole gamut depending on the event. But this is one from back in 2006. It was a reversing 400 challenge. And so you open this. Who's used IDA before? Not bad. I'm impressed. Okay, good. So if you used IDA before, what can you tell me about this binary right off the bat? Like if you cross your eyes and don't look at anything, what can you tell me about this binary? So I'll give you a hint. There's some colors that might be relevant.
It's very hard to see.
It is, but don't ignore the letters. Sometimes literally, like squint, cross your eyes. Don't try to focus on the details. Look at the overall, like what might be, it's not that high. What might be something you can look at from the 20,000 mile kind of view, right? Like what's this color mean right up here? In IDA. Sam knows. I'm going to call on you if nobody else answers. Sam?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, come on. What is this?
One binary? Like the sections?
It's different sections of the binary. Blue is it data? Is it code? What's that?
It has a lot of nodes.
Node functions, right. So this is like, it knows what this stuff is. Like this is all code. All these functions here, and yeah, these purple ones are things it knows, it recognizes, like IDA opens up and says, oh, that's libc. Like, it doesn't have the source code, but it can analyze the binary and figure out what these functions are. So that's the purple ones. These unknown ones are just called subs, but these are all codes. This is all just data. So this thing has as much code as it has data, and it turns out if you look through the code, you're like, I don't see anything interesting. But if you run the program, it does like this encryption loop thing. So obviously they've hidden something in there. And so I'm not as good of a reverse engineer as the folks on my team at the time. And so they were like, oh, sweet. They popped up an I didn't even bother. I'm like, run it, see what it does. And it tells you, usage, encoder string. So you can encode something. And they give you an encoded file. So an encoded file and a program that encoded it, so you have to reverse out the algorithm. And I was like, oh, man, that's hard. I'm not so good with the IDAs. Especially back in 2006, I was terrible with IDAs. So if you actually disassemble it, like you can create a function in that hidden thing and you get math. Math is hard, like I don't want to do that. So I looked at the file, right? I said, oh, okay, so they give you a binary, which, I opened an IDA, that's too hard. And then they give you this encrypted file that is binary output. And it's just, okay, it's kind of gibberish. I don't know what the original stuff was. But it turned out that I just put a bunch of stuff into it and encoded it, and I looked at it. And I put a bunch of other stuff and I encoded it and looked at it. And I noticed that if I changed like just the last letter, like 2 bytes of the output would change. And so the first letter would change it, and 2 bytes of the input would change. So I was like, well, it looks like pairs of inputs make pairs of outputs. I'm like, I can brute force that, right? This is movie style hacking, right? So try all possible pairs of 2 letters, A through Z with A through Z, and look at the output until I match up with the first 2 bytes of the encoded thing. And I get BE. And then I do the next 2 letters, and I do that. And so I literally wrote like, I don't code either. I'm a really terrible coder. I can see in Python a little bit, but again, to the point of you can't start without knowing a lot of programming languages and work your way into it. So I just loop over this. Although, is anybody here like a real Bash junkie? Oh, all right. I put a little Easter egg in here. This you couldn't actually do in 2006 because Bash 4.0 was where they invented this syntax, and it wasn't out in 2000. Anyways. Sorry. I really like Bash. So I thought that was super exciting. I was like, I'm going to hide. I did it so it's smaller so this thing would fit. I used to have A through Z spelled out. Anyways. So I broke the crypto. Does that make sense? You guys kind of get what happened? Like instead of encrypting like the message where all the bits of the input mixed up with all the bits of the output, just 2 bytes in a row made 2 bytes of output. So I just tried all the bytes until I got the 2 that matched, and then I went to the next 2. And I did 4 bytes where I only changed the last 2 bytes until I got 4 bytes that matched. And I just did this 2 bytes at a time by hand with this script, and it was ugly and dirty, but I beat the pants off the guys that did this like reversing, and they were all off in the middle of, and so they just watched him. And I couldn't do that. All right, so here's a challenge from Ghost in the Shell code I'm going to go really fast, by the way, on the slides and skip stuff so we can do more questions at the end. Does that sound good? Sure. Or do you guys have, like, not that many questions? And I'll slow it up and stall for time. I got one sure. Nobody else cares. Okay. Ghost in the Shell code. This is a CTF that we've run 4 years in a row now, I guess. Yeah, 4 years. At ShmooCon up in DC. It's a conference there. We had this fancy board and challenges. So here's a challenge from Ghost in the Shell code. What the heck is chemming was the name of the challenge. So you get this thing. It says what the heck is chemming, and you get a file with this random name. So this is I'm going to give you like the secret workflow. This is how you solve 80% of all CTF challenges that are like forensic file-based challenges, right? So first, number 1, you run file. Who's used file before on a Linux system? Like you type file space and then the file name, and it's like, oh, it's this, and it just tells you. It's a great tool. It's also wrong sometimes. So be careful. And especially in CTFs, people love to put in challenges that screw with file. So they will intentionally mess it up. So, you got to keep in mind that it might be lying to you, or they might have explicitly done something that looks like one thing but really isn't, because that's the kind of evil jerks that people who run CTFs are. So you run file on this thing, it tells you it's an XZ compressed data. Here's what like an XZ compressed data file would normally be called. Like there's a file extension. Exactly, a gzip. In fact, you were telepathically debugging. This is actually a tar-gz. But yeah, it's usually just a gz file. Like you can gzip and gunzip a file. And so if you do that, it turns out, it tells you that, in fact, if you run a different version of file, it'll tell you that the original file name, which is encoded in the gz format, was 43. And you ungz it, and you get this really weird file where things are like out of order. It's pretty obvious as soon enough that things are not in order right. So step number 2 to solving most of these challenges, read the spec. And this sounds intensely boring. And again, this is the kind of thing you would never want to do on a Friday for fun. Like I'm going to sit down and read some RFCs, kick back and hammock, and right? Like usually not. I mean, maybe good for you if you do. But during CTFs, I do this all the time, and I love inflicting this on other people. I abuse some really weird quirk of a format of a specification, something that most people wouldn't even like bother reading, and then I'll take advantage of that in a challenge to force people to learn something interesting new they didn't know. And so this part of the challenge was something I did where it turns out if you read the spec on gzip, which I happen to be doing only because I was making challenges, not because I was bored on the hammock, but there's a quote right at the top that tells you a gzip file consists of a series of members, compressed data sets. The format of each member is, and they give you like this header. But the point is, when you normally gzip something, it makes one big member. Pardon, don't go there within your just saying. Just don't go there. No image search on that. It makes one big member. But the spec says you can have lots of these things in a row, no information additional before, between, or after. Like you just concatenate them together, and that's also a valid gz file. But no tool handles this. No tool handles this the way you would expect, right? So if you have a bunch of chunks with separate file names, like say one file name 01, one with a file name 02, one with a file name 03, and you put them all into one big gz file, which I did, then when you uncompress it, it's going to be out of order. It's just going to be all these different things are just going to cram them all together, even with the separate names that might have indicated a different order. So if you read this, or if you just look in the file and realize, wait, 43 is an odd name for a file, and you analyze it internally, you could also run, there's like a tool called binwalk, which is a really handy tool, which scans for other known files within other files, and it will say, hey, there's a gz thing here, there's a gz thing here, there's a bunch of gzip headers, that's weird. So some people didn't get to the spec, they just noticed there's a bunch of gzip things concatenated together and figured, oh, I'm just gonna undo the order from that. But in reality, there was actually this specification that says you can do this with a file that I thought was kind of neat. So anyways, so now you have to extract and rearrange. That I'm not going to fit in a slide this small. What you can essentially do is you have to break up this file into all these separate pieces. You just look for the bytes that mean this is the header, this is the header. You could do it by hand, it would be tedious, or you could write a little bit of Python. There's also write-ups for these challenges online. So if you Google that text in the title, you'll find the Reddit joke thread, and then you'll also find our CTF challenge write-ups where other teams that played our CTF explain their solutions. And they've got code that you can cheat. But don't do it first, right? Do it by hand first, and when you get stuck, look at their answers. So you extract it, you rearrange it, you put it back together, and then you go to one, right? Start over. So now we've got some new file, and now we get to that tarball. So the guest earlier was like tar gzs are really common. So a tar is essentially a thing that takes a bunch of files and just sticks them all together with a little metadata around it, some other information. And then a gz compresses it and shrinks just single files normally, right? And so a tar gz is kind of like a zip. It takes a bunch of files, puts them all up, and compresses them, even though it's two separate things done together, because that's kind of the Unix way, right? Little tools to do individual things. Okay, so let's start over. And then we run file, we turn out the tarball, and so that we don't have to read the spec of tarball, although sometimes you do. It's good to do, because you may find things you didn't know, and there have been challenges that abuse that. Then you extract it. So you extract it out, and you get these things chemming, you get an HTML file, you get these WAFs. Who knows what a WAF is? See, you would have learned something new. Everybody else would have learned something new playing the CTF, which is the best part about it. So you could either open the HTML file and look at it and see, oh, what is this doing? And it gives you this text, random paragraphs of text in different fonts. And if you look at the source, you see that the fonts are these particular files right here. So now I'm going to go back to the other major rule of CTFs. Google everything. Everything you see. You see a hash, Google it. You never know. You'll decrypt hashes all the time that way. Just search it. You never know what else to find out. And if you were to Google this word, you find out that it's actually a joke on a Reddit thread about kerning, font kerning, right? Which has to do with when you put fonts are really complicated beasts. Really complicated beasts. You would be very surprised. There's a whole virtual machine in the Windows kernel that can run code that exists inside of fonts. Craziness, right? But anyways, kerning is this font technique, and so if you would have read that at the beginning, you'd be like, all right, well, there's a font-related thing. That's interesting. And then sure enough, we've got some fonts, all right? So now you know there's something to do with these fonts. So any guesses on what we do next?
File the fonts.
File the font, and it will just tell you, exactly, it will just tell you it's a WAF, web open file format. What do you do next?
Try to look at the headers, compress them, or read the spec.
There we go, yes, read the spec. This is a man a cookie, right? Read the spec. And so the spec for WAFs is W3 accepted. Firefox originally wrote it. The standards guys, they're like, yep, that sounds good to us. And so you read the spec, and it turns out they describe all sorts of interesting things. And there's some tools you can analyze the header without reading the spec. You don't have to read the spec. But if you do, you'll learn a little bit about the file format. You'll learn that there's this header, and there's these compressed chunks with a certain type of compressed data. And one of the chunk names was called gits. So if you parse out these fonts, and you can do it with a couple of different ways. You could write your own parser. You can download. There's a lot of, I always do apt cache search WAF, right, or apt cache search font, and find the package on Linux that can deal with fonts. And there's some tools that will analyze fonts and dump out information and tell you there's different record names. And so the one that was you'll see one that's called GITS, and again, this is the Ghost in the Shell Code competition, and so GITS is the acronym for it. I thought you guys don't look as excited as I was, but it was really fun. It was really fun, trust me. All right. So playing, like how do you get skills? What do you do? Just a few skills you might be interested in that you need to play the games. Like the bottom line is get a good team of other people, and you're gonna learn from each other. Find the guy that really likes the crypto. Find the person that really likes the web hacking. Find the person that likes binaries. Get everybody to have their own little kind of niche, and then you'll come together and you'll work together, you'll learn from each other, and you'll be effective as a team. So team building is actually a huge part of this, and teams that play as a team will do far more effectively. But there's one true secret to success. Somebody who hasn't seen this talk before, in the 2 warm-up verses I gave of it, want to answer, what do you think is like the one most important thing for playing a CTF? Like the one attribute or skill that you have to have?
Persistence.
Absolutely. You just have to keep trying, right? This is the most important thing. Like, don't give up. It's really easy to give up. If you get stuck, bang away at it for a little while and then go get help from somebody else, right? This is especially good sort of in between CTFs in the lull. Like, take the off season, so to speak, to build up, to practice, to learn. Go back and read other people's write-ups and see how they solve things. And as soon as you start getting a little bit of momentum, you're going to be like, I will never give up until I solve this particular challenge. You won't sleep, although you should, as an aside. You should sleep. That's an important thing that most people overlook. So I wanted to do some specific resources like websites and URLs. Like if you want to go do this, these are the things that you need to know about, you need to learn from. So first, there's actually 3 separate calendars. I maintain this one, captf.com. It's also capture.thefl.ag, but that domain was too expensive, so I let it lapse. Although I think Hockey and June may have picked it up and posted it for me. But so there's a calendar there. That's actually a Google Calendar. So if you use Google Calendar, you can click Add to My Calendar, and poof, all these Capture Flag events show up in your calendar. So you'll see that next weekend there's this Plaid CTF coming up. The Forgotten Sec wiki has a list of a bunch of conferences there as well. And ctftime.org, you'll see captf and ctftime.org show up in a lot of these resources because they're both the really common websites for a lot of this stuff. CTF Time has this whole like complicated ranking system, although it's not complicated. It should be. It should be TrueScale, which Sam has proposed. He's like giving them the code. He's like, here, use this algorithm. It's better, but they haven't yet. So that's our excuse for why we don't care how poorly we do in the rankings. It's a funny thing, man. But so there's a ranking thing, but they also have an upcoming calendar. They have an archive of old events, and they link to the challenges. They link to write-ups. It's actually fairly well done. It's all like fancy Web 2.0 stuff too, so it looks pretty, which is nice. And they're maintaining that really well, so that'll be good. The main reason I put up CapTF many years ago was because there used to be websites that would come up that would host a couple CTF things and they'd disappear, and you couldn't find like good archives. So that's like an archive going back 7 years of a bunch of CTFs I could get my hands on. So there's all sorts of old stuff, which actually, skipping ahead, other archives, right? There'll be one link at the end where these slides are. You can get all the links where you don't have to write this stuff down. Questions? Any questions or other comments? I warned you before.
So other than like, I know I've already asked like, what's a good way to start? Been to a couple of DevCons and you walk around the room and you can watch, but a lot of these like you're saying are online things. Is there an arena or something where you can see activity that's going on in real time so that before you want to take the jump and try to start doing it yourself, you can get a little more used to it? Yeah,
so that's a good question. This is inherently not a great spectator sport for the most part. I mean, people have tried to make it such, but it doesn't work out all that well. Supposedly, the guys that are doing DEF CON this year are going to try to make it more interactive or more exciting for the audience. I don't know what they're going to do.
Don't generally encourage.
Well, the teams spy at each other like crazy. We're evil, right? So when you want to come over, and it's unfortunately negative pressure because we quite literally have spied on other teams, like no question, and they do it to us, and that's part of the game. And it's a hacking game, so if you're not cheating, you're not trying. Within reason, like there are rules you don't break. Like I have a whole bunch of, I have an old DEF CON talk I gave, I linked to later on here, where I talk about some of the there's some rules you just don't break because they just ruin the game, and like if you're going to ruin it, why bother playing, right? But certainly cheating is an important part of the game, and so spying on other people, yeah, if they're going to let somebody walk up and like look on their screen, then take advantage of it. So unfortunately, that means that people don't trust you. Like we literally had like bodyguard, like friends that would just stand there and be like, "Can I help you?" Like shielding our table at DEF CON. You may have experienced this. I apologize.
Yeah, I think my first year there, I was just not so much you, but just the first year there walking around, it was like everybody was just like, "Get away."
Yeah, it's not a friendly environment. You can watch the scoreboard, but you really don't know what's going on. There have been very few attempts to do that, especially on the on-person, like DEF CON itself. And DEF CON is so competitive. It's really one of the most competitive ones, so that's part of the reason why you see that. But some of the online ones, you can hang out in IRC. Most of them will have an IRC channel associated with it, and that's often a lot of fun. You kind of see the challenges that different people are working on. And then after it's over, you'll see people talking about how they solve different things and interacting. You'll see a lot of trolling as well. So the one thing I forgot to put slides on is like sort of the culture of CTFs. There's a lot of misogyny. There's a lot of trolling. There's a lot of just outright rude, racist, terrible things. There's some not the prettiest of things going on. It's kind of like, I don't know. It's its own culture, and some of them are better and worse than others, but I want to at least get that out there. Like, don't go to DEF CON with young children, because the things they do to sheep on the videos are not appropriate. I would not take it. There is DEF CON kids. They should stay away from the CTF room. Although I hope they're going to get better this year. I don't know if they will. I don't expect it, knowing the organizer.
I already announced last year there's 21 this year, and there's drinking.
DEF CON itself, right? Yeah, there is. Yeah. See, that was one other tactic in the CTF, was get the other teams drunk, actually. It was free alcohol for anyone who's competing against me. So the CTFs themselves don't generally have great interactive modes. What you usually will see is forums developing around them. So there's the online games, right, where you're playing like over a weekend. Plaid CTF's coming up. It runs, it stops, and then you can see the archives, but the game is essentially over. There's a winner. And then there's the other ones that run permanently. So that's which is what this slide actually is. You see right what I did there? So the practice CTFs, there's just a whole bunch of like always on, always there challenges you can go and pick up and do. Most of these will have forums associated. Many of them will have forums associated with them where people are talking about the challenges, working on it. So if you want to get a hint without getting an answer, there's people that can help you with that, which is kind of a nice thing. There's really no substitute for having a group, which is great to see that UCF, for example, has their big student club that they're kind of putting together just this last year, which has been exciting because it's like in my own backyard. I'm from Melbourne, Florida, so in my own backyard. I grew up in Oviedo, so this is exciting to see that this is kind of happening here. I've been to a lot of other universities where this is going on, but it's awesome that they got a team here. Find a hackerspace and get a club there. Find friends online for and kind of band together, because that really will make a big difference in terms of encouraging you to kind of participate and play. UF is a number of Colonel Sanders, and what's the new team name now?
Colonel Sanders.
It's still Colonel Sanders? Okay, yeah. They've gone through different names, which I was one of the founders of many years ago. My a friend and I just were like, hey, we should have a club, and then it's still around. So it's stuff is fun, right? Kind of self-perpetuates. But playing with a team is important. But these, so they're always running. There's forums, like you can get a lot of help. Yeah, good question. There's a bunch of videos. I mean, if you learn better, orally, audio, whatever, with your ears or with your eyes, you could see these. These are some of the folks. Hacker Joe was one of the original Kinshoto guys that ran DEF CON, really made DEF CON CTF what it is in a lot of ways. Like the game that we play today is the one essentially they built primarily. I spoke at DEF CON about playing DEF CON CTF in particular, and how you would organize your team, and some more details for that particular CTF that may be less relevant to some other CTFs. Like you would organize a team for CCDC very differently than you would organize a team for DEF CON, because there's different challenges, different skills, different things you can and can't do. I do a lot of hiring for my job. We have a fairly large office of people that do this kind of stuff, and I've hired more people who've been kicked out of CCDC than have won CCDC, and we've hired both, but we've had more that get kicked out, because that's the kind of mindset I have. Chris Eagle, who is an instructor at the Naval Postgraduate School. I'm going to make you keep up. Is an instructor at the Naval Postgraduate School, and he is like one of the godfathers of CTF. He has been. I talked to him recently, and he said he's been playing since DEF CON 7 or 8, I think, and it's DEF CON 20 now. He's been playing or running DEF CON longer than I think anybody else around. Like I've got a streak of playing for 7 years in a row. I don't think anybody else has managed that in the finals, but that's only because Eagle was running it. If he was playing still, he'd have been in those finals, as well, and have a much longer streak. There's another one from Mike Arpea. There's a ShmooCon roundtable discussion about organizing a CTF as well. So before you're going to run and organize a CTF, you should check out that. It's a bunch of different folks that have run big CTFs, kind of talking about some of the challenges and lessons. All right, running it. All right, we're doing pretty good. So I'm going to go relatively quickly. First, has anybody seen Schlock Mercenary? Somebody? Really? Is that a yes? Yes, we have one. See? He's seen Schlock Mercenary. It's an awesome webcomic, right? It's really funny. You should check it out. Howard, what's his last name?
I don't know.
Starts with an S. Anyways, it's a good webcomic. He has this really funny kind of recurring joke in his talk called the 77 maxims of a maximally effective pirate. And includes things like pillage then burn. You know, it's important to get that order right. Like you don't burn and then pillage. Like that would not work real well. But it's actually for like space mercenaries. It's out there. Anyways, it's really funny though. Based on that, because another friend that does CTFs was equally a fan of this, and we were kind of talking about some of the lessons we learned, things that we wanted to teach people. So we came up with the many maxims of a maximally effective CTF. So before you think about running a CTF, I would highly encourage you to read. The URL has like a longer like screed online. It's like my manifesto. In fact, it was originally named Manifesto. We don't want to freak people out. Not that this is any less scary, but as a name. And so here's some of the kind of things. I'm going to go through them again real quick. I don't expect most of you in here will want to run a CTF, but so you at least are aware of these are going to be things that a bad CTF will do, and you'll recognize it. I've done it before. Some of mine. I mean, it's hard to get right. But people hack for fun, not for frustration. Right? The biggest complaint about CTF is that just wasn't fun. Like I didn't enjoy that. Again, the whole point of doing this stuff is because it's a good challenge, it's fun, it's exciting. But if you get frustrated, if everybody who plays your CTF is frustrated, you didn't run a very good CTF. Now this is hard because that means difficulty is really hard to scale. Because if you make it too easy, the people that are really good are like, well, that wasn't fun. If you make it too hard, the people that don't have experience say, well, that wasn't any fun. So sometimes you have to pick an audience and make it fun for them and just be unapologetic about it. And sometimes you have to just be really good about a scale of difficulties. Now, there's very few CTFs that do that. That's really hard. So it's a good goal to aim for, but again, it's very difficult to kind of get that level right. The scoring mechanism should always be the easiest challenge. There's one particular CTF I like picking on called ICTF. Giovanni Vigna is a professor at the University of California, Santa Barbara, is one of the other like staples of CTFs. He's been playing for years. The Shellfish was a team that won DEF CON many years ago. They've been playing for a long time. And they've run this ICTF for a number of years now. Their scoring algorithm takes a spreadsheet. Like, one does not simply score in this CTF. Like, you have an algorithm and formula and when you can score and when you can't score. And it's just, to even understand how to play the game is most of the challenge. Like, once you get it, you're like, oh, well then, okay, I should just do this. Now I can actually go solve this technical challenge. But they make the game itself part of the challenge, which is one of my pet peeves, because people get very frustrated. Like, they don't even know what they're supposed to do to try to win the game, because that's, opaque. It's way too complicated. Maybe he has some very good academic reason why. He's a smart professor and does some good research, but I don't like it. So make the scoring really easy and obvious and simple. A related one to that, I don't think it shows up later, is that your key, for example, if you get a key, you should know when you got a key. Oh, this does come up later, I think. Right? Because sometimes you got the answer, you don't even know it. Like, pet peeve I have is people will just make a URL the key. So you're doing a bunch of challenges and you like unpack a file, you get something, and then you get a URL, and you go to the URL, and you're looking for the next challenge, and the key was the URL. You just had to like paste that into the scoreboard, you'd have been done. But if it's not obvious that that's the key, it's really irritating. And we did that this year at Ghost of the Shotgun, and it kind of annoys me. For a 50-point challenge, no less. That was evil. Sorry about that, guys, if you played Ghost of the Shotgun. That was cruel. So that's basically this. You should know when you're done. It should be like, you might not know how to get there, so maybe a challenge to figure out how to solve it, but once you've solved it, it should be obvious you've solved it. You shouldn't have to guess every time you think you might be done. Koreans do this a lot. There's a lot of guessing at Korean CTFs. They make great CTFs, but they tend to be more brute force and just keep trying until it works. When the next step requires a leap of faith, be sure to include a bridge. One of the biggest insults people give a CTF is that require lots of guessing. Right? And this is hard because you want to make a challenge that's difficult, but you don't want it just to be so like random that you just have to try different unrelated things that no one would reasonably expect to be tried. And so this is very difficult to strike a balance. The only way to do that is to try to give hints. Multiple paths is another good way of doing it. I like to like breadcrumbs, right? So I like to have little discrete challenges like that font thing. You knew when you reassembled the tarball correctly because it extracted correctly. So it was sort of like one discrete challenge. You solved that, and then there was another little challenge that was, the next thing. So you knew you had made progress. If you have a bunch of different steps you have to do, but you don't know when one was the correct one, it's really frustrating. An homage honors, but duplication doesn't. Like, don't rip off somebody else's. That's just overly wordy for don't be a jerk. Learners always win even when winners don't learn. Again, the point of this is learning, and so you don't have to win the CTF, and you can have a lot of fun. You can learn a ton. You can be, have developed skills and improved, and be really happy and had a great time dead last, right? Like, that's completely possible. So it's fun to win. A lot of people are very competitive about it, but learning is really what kind of is going to energize people when they learn something new. Your point estimate, yeah. If you try to do points, they're going to be wrong. You're going to have a 400-point challenge like that other one I mentioned earlier that somebody can solve with a bash script. Not supposed to be able to do that, right? Like they didn't intend for that to be a solution. And likewise, you'll have a 50-point one that's really hard. We had hundreds of teams playing in our Ghost in the Shell Code challenge. Only 18 solved our easiest 50-point challenge because we made it more obnoxious than we should have. So you can either fix it on the fly or just say, I'm sorry a lot. Yeah, some other ones. That's good enough. Competitors are more clever. This is a pretty fun one. No matter how hard you think you make it, when you put it on the internet, especially, and a small conference, that's not necessarily true, but when you put something on the internet, you know, lots of teams do this a lot, play, they will come up with solutions you've never thought of. They will do it faster than you could ever imagine. There's a lot of really good people out there doing this stuff. Learning starts with prior knowledge ends, right? So find something that nobody has ever seen before or people haven't played with, and force them to go into that. Force them to learn, more about that. But don't do it so it's frustrating, right? Again, the whole point is to make it so that they can have some progress and enjoy it because that's what. Okay. All right. So that's it. I think we've got just a couple, maybe like 2 minutes or so, not too much for 5 minutes. We got 5 minutes, excellent, for questions. That's about right. Thanks to folks. Here's the slides. So this right here has the slides. So if you want to grab like just that URL, they were uploaded as of like 5 a.m. So what's that? Take a picture? Or just CACTF.com. I'll email it to you. So you want it? Yeah.
Slides will be online too.
Should I write it on the board?
You can. Sure. You get lots of interesting spams. Okay, so questions.
Thank you.
That happened very quickly.
No questions. That boring? That easy? That trivial? That complicated? No feedback.
It's all good.
Who's going to play a CTF now?
Woo! There's great segue. There's actually a CTF going on
Right
in
now.
Village.
How convenient is that? And so I've talked to these guys. And this is a good CTF. They're really trying to make this kind of an entry-level CTF. It starts a little bit more like a pen testing flavor kind of CTF. And if you're going to break into some server, you can use existing tools kind of out of the box. So you can learn some of the kind of basic pen testing type tools. But as you progress in the challenges, you're going to have to do stuff by hand. You're going to have to extend the tools or fix things or do stuff on your own that nothing's going to solve automatically for you. So that sounds like a good balance. I'm excited to kind of play with it if I get time. You should too. Anything else? All right. Oh wait, question.
When you were saying about starting a beginner CTF and you have 3 different styles, so which one do you think would make more sense?
For beginner CTF, I think the most common one, honestly, is the red team exercise. It's sort of like you just put up a bunch of challenges and people solve it. It's the most common. It's probably the most fun and why most people play CTFs. If I can click enough to, that's like a fake Prezi, by the way. I like Prezi, but this is like the PowerPoint version of it. You just do a slide transition, you chop an image, and anyways. Yeah, the red team is just put a scoreboard up, throw a bunch of challenges on it. That to me is it's easier to set up in many ways because you can just do a bunch of independent challenges. You don't have to build a cohesive like server. Although you can, you can actually make intricate like paths through multiple servers and lots of. Those can be a little hard though because one difficult challenge you get stuck and you can't get to the later stuff. The nice thing about the sort of like scoreboard is that if this one's too hard, you go to this one. You try other ones. You can do multiple things. Although from a competitive aspect, that favors bigger teams. So that kind of has that trade-off. But
Well, like you said, multiple paths to get to
multiple paths through the same problem is a really good way to do it, right? Anytime you can either solve it this way, or if you go this other route, I'll give you a hint that kind of puts you back on the right path. Maybe I'll tell you. So for one of I had an image challenge one where it was out of focus. There's a piece of software that actually just magically will make it in focus, and I thought this was the most amazing thing ever. If you've ever seen this software, it literally will take blurry photos and just fix them, and you can read things you wouldn't otherwise be able to read. It's ridiculous. So I was like, I'm gonna make a CTF challenge of that. It was an easy challenge. But if you started opening up the JPEG, reading the spec, and reading go to embedded metadata, it says no, really, the challenge is exactly like it sounds. You just need to find a way to make this be in focus. There's no other hidden embedded metadata. It told you, no, go back that way. Good try. You were looking the right. It's not a bad idea, but now go back and just try to find the right software that would actually make this picture be in focus, right? All right. One more.
Yeah. Why do in-person CTFs have such terrible music playing all the time?
Ghost in the Shell Code had excellent music. So we had a DJ live streaming video, a video DJ. It was over the internet, so you could stream the broadcast. So I argue we had good music. As for the rest, I make no excuses. DEF CON especially is not all that great. They'll have some good tracks with them.
and that it can be bad.
It's loud.
I can get loud, but like
No,
it's just,
it can't be either bad and quiet. It has to
Yeah.
be loud and bad.
All right, thanks everybody, appreciate it.
Everybody knows,